The courtroom was so silent that the faint scratch of a pen sounded deafening. In the front row, a mother-in-law sat with a smug smile, clutching a document designed to leave her son's wife with absolutely nothing. She believed the forged signature was her winning ticket. Instead, it was the mistake that would cost her everything. The heavy mahogany doors closed with a decisive thud, shutting out the humid afternoon. Inside Judge Thaddeus Mercer's courtroom, the air conditioning system produced a steady, sterile hum. Maris Ashford sat rigidly at the petitioner's table, her carefully manicured fingers locked together on the polished wood. After a painful marriage and a prolonged scorched earth divorce, she wanted only one thing: freedom. Across the aisle sat her estranged husband, Dorian Ashford. Dorian looked flawless, as he always did. His custom-made navy suit cost more than many people's cars. But Maris was not watching him. Her anxious gaze remained fixed on the woman sitting directly behind him in the gallery. Lenora Ashford, Dorian's mother. Lenora seemed to have been carved from cold, inherited arrogance. She possessed the kind of wealth that never needed to announce itself. It appeared in the softness of her cashmere coat, the understated jewelry around her throat, and the permanent expression of disapproval on her face. From the moment Maris, the self-made daughter of a public school teacher, married into the Ashford real estate dynasty, Lenora had made her contempt unmistakably clear. To Lenora, Maris was an outsider, a social climber, a gold digger who had somehow buried her claws in the Ashford empire. The irony was almost unbearable. When Dorian and Maris married, the Ashford family business had been quietly collapsing beneath the weight of toxic commercial real estate loans in downtown Chicago. It was Maris's relentless work ethic, sharp understanding of logistics, and substantial inheritance from her late uncle that had funded their joint venture, Ashford Hale Logistics. Maris had transformed a failing regional shipping company into a national powerhouse. She had created the fortune they were now fighting over. "Your Honor," Vivienne Harrow said as she rose from the respondent's table. Dorian's attorney was elegant, expensive, and notoriously merciless. At this time, the respondent wishes to introduce a newly discovered exhibit into evidence. A copy has already been provided to opposing counsel. Maris's attorney, Gideon Shaw, immediately stood. I was a seasoned litigator with a permanent scowl and little patience for courtroom games. "Objection, Your Honor. Discovery has closed and we are already addressing the final allocation of assets." He gestured toward the folder in Harrow's hand. "This is a classic trial by ambush." Judge Mercer peered over his reading glasses. His deep-set eyes narrowed. "Ms. Harrow, you know better than to introduce a bombshell during the final stage of proceedings." He folded his hands on the bench. "What is this document, and why was it not produced earlier?" "Your Honor," Harrow replied smoothly, her voice carrying across the high-paneled walls, "my client had no idea the document still existed." She turned slightly toward the gallery. "It was recently discovered by his mother, Lenora Ashford, while she was clearing an old family vault at J.P. Morgan Private Bank." Harrow lifted the file. "It has profound and undeniable consequences for the equitable distribution of assets in this case." She handed a beige folder to the bailiff, who carried it to the bench. Then she walked to the petitioner's table and placed a second copy in front of Gideon. "What is it?" Maris whispered. Her heart began pounding against her ribs. Gideon opened the folder. The color drained from his face. He stared at the pages for a long, agonizing moment before sliding them toward her. It was a prenuptial agreement. Maris stared at the bold legal heading: Premarital Asset Protection and Waiver of Claim Agreement. The date printed at the top placed its execution shortly before her wedding to Dorian in Lake Como. Her eyes raced across the text. The provisions were merciless. According to the document, if the marriage ended, Maris waived all rights to alimony and surrendered any claim to businesses created during the marriage. Most devastatingly, it stated that her original investment in Ashford Hale Logistics had been a non-refundable gift to the Ashford Family Trust. The agreement would leave her with nothing but the clothes she wore. Maris turned to the final page. There, written in black ink, was her signature: Maris Hale. "This is a lie," she gasped. Her voice carried farther than she intended. "I never signed this. I have never seen this document in my life." From the gallery, Lenora released a quiet, dismissive scoff. Maris turned toward her. Lenora met her eyes with pure triumph. A chilling smile played at the corners of her mouth. "Your Honor," Gideon said, his voice rising with righteous anger, "this is an obvious forgery." High held up the document. "My client has maintained from the beginning that no prenuptial agreement existed. Producing something of this magnitude after discovery closed is highly prejudicial and strongly suggests fraud." "Fraud?" Harrow shot back, spinning toward him. "Your Honor, the document is fully executed, witnessed, and notarized." She pointed toward the final page. "Mrs. Ashford's signature is completely consistent with every other signature she has submitted in this case." Harrow's expression hardened. "The fact that she has conveniently forgotten signing a document protecting my client's family legacy is not our responsibility," she continued confidently. It was executed at First Republic Bank in Chicago and notarized by a licensed state official. We also have a handwriting specialist prepared to testify regarding its authenticity. Judge Mercer rubbed his temples, visibly irritated by the chaos unfolding in his courtroom. He studied the signature before looking down at Maris, whose hands were now trembling violently. Ms. Harrow, the timing of this discovery is deeply suspicious, he said. However, if this is a valid prenuptial agreement, it may supersede the current asset distribution proceedings. He looked toward Gideon. Mr. Shaw, I will provisionally admit the document as Exhibit 414. The judge raised his gavel. I am calling a brief recess so you may examine it with your client. When these proceedings resume, you will need more than a simple accusation of forgery if you intend to challenge its authenticity. Thank you, Your Honor, Harrow said with a satisfied smile. The gavel fell. As Judge Mercer left the bench, Dorian finally looked toward Maris. His face appeared slightly pale, but he offered no apology. Instead, he quickly turned to whisper to his mother. Lenora stood and smoothed her immaculate cashmere coat. As she passed the petitioner's table, she looked down at Maris. You truly believe you could walk away with half of what belongs to us? She whispered coldly. Her smile deepened. You were always a terrible investment, Maris. Maris could not breathe. The courtroom walls seemed to be moving inward. Gideon grabbed her elbow. His firm grip anchored her. Do not say another word to them, he ordered quietly. Take the file. We are going to the conference room. The windowless attorney conference room smelled of stale coffee and floor wax. Maris paced like a trapped animal, her mind racing back to the days surrounding her wedding. I did not sign it, Gideon. Her voice trembled with terror and rage. I swear to you, I never signed that document. She turned toward him. Dorian and I explicitly agreed there would be no prenuptial agreement. He told me his mother demanded one, but he refused. Maris clenched her fist. This is Lenora, she created it. Gideon sat at the laminate table studying the final page through a small jeweler's loupe he carried for her, examining fine contract print. The signature is almost flawless, he said grimly. High looked up. If Lenora hired a professional forger, the person was extremely skilled. The pressure marks and the shape of the letters match the signature on your driver's license. Han examined it again. But that is precisely what concerns me. It may be too perfect. What does that mean? Perfect copies are often traced from legitimate documents using a light box. Then we prove it was traced. It is not that simple. Gideon sighed and rubbed his eyes. At the moment, we only have a photocopy. Harrow will keep the original protected until her expert examines it. Hein leaned back. By the time we obtain our own forensic specialist and prove the signature was traced, the divorce could be delayed indefinitely. His expression darkened. Your assets would remain frozen, and Lenora would bury you beneath legal fees for years. Maris stopped pacing. She forced herself to breathe. Then she summoned the same cold, analytical discipline that had turned Ashford Hale Logistics into a national success. She walked to the table and stared at the document. Let me see it. She leaned over the pages. Instead of reading the devastating clauses, she focused entirely on the technical details. Her gaze moved to the execution date, then to the notary stamp in the lower corner. Everett Langley. Notary Public. State of Illinois, County of Cook. Maris froze. A sharp realization cut through her panic. She stared at the notary's name as her pulse thundered in her ears. Everett Langley, she whispered. Do you know him? Gideon asked. I was not a bank teller at First Republic. Maris spoke slowly as an old memory came rushing back. I was a senior private wealth manager at J.P. Morgan's downtown branch. Gideon leaned forward. Harrow said this document was discovered in a J.P. Morgan vault. That connection makes sense. I frowned. But why would a senior wealth manager notarize an ordinary prenuptial agreement? Maris looked up. A slow, dangerous smile spread across her face. The panic disappeared. In its place came the deadly calm of a woman who had just realized she was holding the winning hand. Because I did not sign a prenuptial agreement in Everett Langley's office. Her voice dropped to a fierce whisper. But I did sign another document in front of him. A very important document. What did you sign? Do you remember when I told you the Ashford family was quietly drowning in debt before Dorian and I married? Gideon nodded. Lenora had borrowed against nearly the entire family real estate portfolio, Maris explained. Several commercial skyscrapers were approaching foreclosure. If the market had discovered the truth, the Ashford legacy would have collapsed. She sat across from Gideon. Dorian came to me begging for help. He was terrified that his mother would learn he could not rescue the business. You used your inheritance to save them, Gideon said. You funded the logistics company. That was only part of it. Maris leaned forward. I could not simply hand Dorian $20 million. I am a businesswoman. I established a blind trust and created an offshore holding company called Cobalt Financial. She continued. Through J.P. Morgan, Cobalt Financial quietly purchased all of Lenora Ashford's toxic debt from her creditors. Gideon's jaw fell open. You bought your mother-in-law's debt? All of it. Maris's eyes shone with vindication. I restructured the loan so the Ashford family would not collapse. But I protected myself with a comprehensive collateral agreement. She spoke each word carefully. If the Ashfords defaulted, or if they took any hostile action against my property, Cobalt Financial could immediately call in the entire debt. The collateral included Lenora's estate, her homes, her trusts, her remaining shares in the logistics company. Maris held his gaze. Everything. And Lenora did not know? She believed an anonymous European investment fund had rescued her. A bitter laugh escaped Maris. Dorian knew, but he promised never to tell her. Her ego could not survive knowing that the supposedly low-class girl she despised had saved her empire. Maris looked down at the forged agreement. Shortly before the wedding, I sat in Everett Langley's office at J.P. Morgan and signed the final debt restructuring agreement. It was 150 pages long. I signed the last page and Everett notarized it. Gideon stared at the alleged prenuptial agreement. Understanding slowly spread across his face. They took the signature page from the J.P. Morgan loan documents. Hobb began assembling the pieces. Lenora must have discovered the old debt agreement inside the family vault. She saw your signature on a separate final page. She either did not read the financial language or did not care what it meant. Gideon's eyes narrowed. She removed the signature page, attached it to a fabricated prenuptial agreement, and brought it into court. Exactly. Maris rose. She believed she was stealing my company. Her voice became quiet and lethal. She never realized that the page she used to forge this agreement is the page proving that I own her. Gideon did not waste another second. He opened his laptop and began typing furiously. I am preparing an emergency subpoena immediately. He looked toward Maris. J.P. Morgan's downtown office is nearby. I am demanding Everett Langley's appearance and the complete, untouched file connected to Cobalt Financial's transaction. When the courtroom reconvened, every seat was occupied. The tension was almost impossible to breathe through. Lenora sat in the front row, radiating smug confidence, completely unaware of the storm approaching her. Are the parties prepared to continue? Judge Mercer asked as he returned to the bench. We are, Your Honor, Vivian Harrow said proudly. The respondent calls Lenora Ashford to authenticate the discovery of the prenuptial agreement. Lenora walked toward the witness stand with the elegance of a queen approaching her throne. She placed one hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, and sat while carefully smoothing her skirt. Under Harrow's gentle questioning, Lenora delivered a polished and convincing lie. She claimed she had been organizing Dorian's old safe deposit box at J.P. Morgan when she accidentally discovered the agreement. Thank you, Mrs. Ashford, Harrow said with a smile. She turned toward Gideon. Your witness. Gideon stood. I carried no notepad. He walked slowly toward the podium and allowed the silence to stretch until Lenora visibly became irritated. Mrs. Ashford, he began in a dangerously calm voice, you testified that you discovered this document in a J.P. Morgan vault. That is correct. You are familiar with J.P. Morgan's private wealth management division, are you not? I am, Lenora replied haughtily. My family has banked there for generations. Excellent. Gideon rested one hand on the podium. Let us discuss the financial condition of your family during the period identified on this alleged prenuptial agreement. His gaze sharpened. Is it not true that the Ashford family was approaching complete bankruptcy because of unsuccessful commercial real estate investments? Objection! Harrow shouted, leaping to her feet. Relevance. The family's previous financial condition has nothing to do with the authenticity of this agreement. It speaks directly to the origin of the document and the witness's motive, Gideon replied smoothly. Overruled, Judge Mercer said. He leaned forward, now deeply interested. You may answer, Mrs. Ashford. Lenora's face flushed dark red. We experienced a temporary liquidity issue. She raised her chin. It was resolved. Our family has always been financially secure. Resolved, Gideon repeated. Yes. He stepped closer. It was resolved by an organization called Cobalt Financial, which purchased more than $60 million of your toxic debt and prevented foreclosure. He paused. Are you familiar with Cobalt Financial, Mrs. Ashford? Lenora sneered. They are an institutional investor. Her eyes flashed angrily. What does any of this have to do with Maris trying to steal my son's inheritance? Before Gideon could answer, the heavy wooden doors at the rear of the courtroom swung open. A silver-haired man wearing a sharp gray suit entered. He carried a heavy leather briefcase secured with steel latches. The J.P. Morgan logo was embossed on the side. 2 armed private security officers accompanied him. Gideon smiled. It was a slow, wolfish expression that sent a visible tremor through Lenora. Because, Mrs. Ashford, the records have arrived. His voice rang through the courtroom. They will reveal who truly owns Cobalt Financial. He glanced toward the alleged prenuptial agreement. And they will prove exactly what document my client actually signed. Lenora's smug expression finally broke. Judge Mercer peered over his reading glasses. The irritation on his face transformed into intense curiosity. Mr. Shaw, who is this gentleman? Your Honor, I call Everett Langley. Vivian Harrow scrambled to her feet. Her composure began to fracture. Objection, this witness was not included on the approved witness list. This is an ambush. Counselor, you introduced an unexpected exhibit into these proceedings, Judge Mercer snapped. You opened this door. His patience had vanished. I will allow Mr. Shaw to walk through it. Objection overruled. He gestured toward the witness stand. Mr. Langley, please come forward. Everett Langley had the stern face and silver hair of a man who had spent decades protecting the secrets of powerful financial institutions. He passed the petitioner's table, took the oath, and sat with a heavy briefcase resting across his knees. Lenora stared at him. Her fingers gripped the wooden railing until her knuckles turned white. Beside her, Dorian looked as though every drop of blood had left his body. I knew exactly who Everett Langley was. "Mr. Langley," Gideon began, walking slowly before the witness stand. "Please state your occupation for the court." "I am a senior managing director in the private wealth management division of J.P. Morgan Chase in Chicago," Everett replied in a steady baritone. "I am also a licensed notary public for the state of Illinois." Gideon lifted the beige folder containing the disputed agreement and handed it to the bailiff. "Please examine the final page of Exhibit 414. The bailiff passed it to Everett. "Is that your notary stamp and signature?" Everett removed a pair of glasses from his breast pocket. He studied the page carefully. "Yes, the stamp and signature are mine." He looked more closely. "The notary ledger number is 84B. Harrow released a quiet breath of relief. It came far too soon. "Mr. Langley," Gideon continued, his eyes fixed on Lenora. "Did you notarize a short prenuptial agreement for Maris Hale on the date shown here?" "Absolutely not," Everett replied firmly. "My department does not handle ordinary family law agreements. We handle complex corporate finance, private wealth matters, and high-value debt restructuring." "Then what document did you notarize for my client under ledger number 84B? Everett opened the steel latches of his briefcase. He removed a thick, leather-bound notary ledger. Then he lifted out a massive contract printed on heavy, watermarked bank paper. "According to my official ledger, number 84B corresponds to a commercial debt restructuring and collateral transfer agreement." He raised the contract. The Ashford Family Trust was the debtor. Cobalt Financial LLC was the creditor. A collective gasp moved through the courtroom. Vivian Harrow slowly sank into her chair. She finally understood the catastrophic mistake her client had forced her to present. "And who is the sole managing member and financial beneficiary of Cobalt Financial LLC?" Gideon asked. "Maris Hale," Everett answered clearly. "She funded the company using $20 million transferred from her separate inheritance." He continued. "The agreement provided that Cobalt Financial would assume more than $60 million of distressed commercial real estate debt owed by Lenora Ashford." Gideon turned toward Judge Mercer. "Your Honor, I direct the court's attention to the physical paper used for the signature page in Exhibit 414. He looked back at Everett. "Mr. Langley, what type of paper does J.P. Morgan use for final execution contracts?" "We use archival-grade cotton paper containing a microscopic ultraviolet reactive watermark of the bank's seal." Everett adjusted his glasses. "It is intended to prevent document theft, corporate espionage, and fraud. I have an ultraviolet light." Gideon removed a small black flashlight from his pocket. He switched it on and directed the beam toward the final page of the alleged prenuptial agreement. An intricate J.P. Morgan Chase seal immediately glowed across the center of the paper. The courtroom became completely silent. "Well," Gideon said softly, "the signature page of this alleged prenuptial agreement was printed on J.P. Morgan's proprietary corporate paper." He moved the ultraviolet light toward the lower corner of the page. "Furthermore, Your Honor, someone appears to have chemically removed the original page number." He adjusted the angle. "But the writing remains faintly visible." Gideon read it aloud. "Page 150 of 150. Judge Mercer leaned so far over the bench that he nearly hovered above the court reporter. His face had become a mask of pure fury. "Mrs. Ashford," Gideon said, turning toward Lenora, who was now visibly trembling, "it appears that when you discovered the debtor's copy of the master loan agreement, you removed its final signature page." He pointed toward Exhibit 414. "You attached that page to a fabricated prenuptial agreement." His voice sharpened. "Then you gave this manufactured document to your attorney and presented it to the court." Gideon allowed the accusations to fall one by one. "Forgery, perjury, attempted fraud against a judicial proceeding." "That is a lie!" Lenora screamed, jumping to her feet. Her cashmere coat slipped from her shoulders. "She manipulated everything!" Lenora pointed wildly toward Maris. "She is trying to steal my family's legacy." "Mrs. Ashford, sit down and remain silent." Judge Mercer's roar seemed to shake the light fixtures. "If you interrupt again, I will have you restrained." He turned his furious gaze toward Dorian's attorney. "Ms. Harrow, do you have anything to say?" Vivian Harrow rose slowly. Her face had gone pale. Her professional reputation hung by a thread. "Your Honor, as an officer of this court, I state for the record that I had no knowledge that this document was fraudulent." She looked toward Lenora and Dorian. "I was explicitly assured by both of them that it was authentic." Harrow drew a careful breath. "I formally withdraw Exhibit 414. She paused. "I also request immediate permission to withdraw as counsel for the respondent." Dorian grabbed her arm. "You cannot leave. You work for me." Harrow tore herself free in disgust. "I am finished with you, Dorian." Her voice was cold. "You allowed your mother to commit a felony in court." "Counsel's request to withdraw is granted," Judge Mercer said. He brought the gavel down with a thunderous crack. "Furthermore, I order the bailiff to seize Exhibit 414 and place it in a secure evidence locker." He looked toward Lenora. I am referring Lenora Ashford to the appropriate prosecutorial authorities for immediate investigation into aggravated forgery, perjury, and attempted fraud against the court. Two court officers moved toward the front row and positioned themselves directly behind Lenora. She looked desperately around the room. Her empire of arrogance had completely collapsed. But Gideon Shaw was not finished. Your Honor, there is one remaining issue. His voice returned to its calm, lethal rhythm. As Mr. Langley testified, the document my client actually signed was a collateral transfer agreement. Gideon lifted the enormous J.P. Morgan contract. The agreement states that Cobalt Financial may call the full debt immediately, without a grace period, if the debtor engages in hostile action, fraudulent litigation, or attempted theft against the creditor. Dorian gasped and covered his mouth. He finally understood the trap they had triggered. By fabricating a prenuptial agreement intended to strip my client of her property, Gideon continued, Lenora and Dorian Ashford activated the hostile action clause. He turned toward the judge. Cobalt Financial is therefore calling the loan. His voice became final. The Ashford Family Trust now owes Maris Hale $60 million, payable immediately. Judge Mercer leaned back in his chair. A grim smile touched the corners of his mouth. And if the debt cannot be paid, he asked, then Cobalt Financial takes possession of the collateral. Gideon looked directly at Dorian. That collateral includes the Ashford family estate, the remaining commercial skyscrapers, and Dorian Ashford's ownership interest in Ashford Hale Logistics. He faced the judge. My client no longer seeks merely half of the company. She will take all of it. Dorian turned toward his mother. Tears of complete defeat filled his eyes. You destroyed us, he whispered. His voice shook with rage. You could not allow her to receive what was fair. You needed everything. He stared at Lenora. Now we have nothing. Lenora sat frozen. Her mouth remained open in a silent expression of disbelief as the officers instructed her to remain inside the courtroom until police investigators arrived. Judge Mercer lifted his gavel one final time. Given the extraordinary circumstances and the blatant criminal fraud committed by the respondent's side, I am ruling entirely in favor of the petitioner. He looked toward Maris. The division of assets will proceed according to Ms. Hale's original filings, subject to enforcement of the J.P. Morgan debt agreement. The gavel struck the bench. Court is adjourned. The courtroom slowly emptied, leaving the wreckage of the Ashford dynasty behind. Maris walked out beside Gideon. The heavy mahogany doors closed behind them, cutting off the sound of Lenora's sudden, hysterical sobbing. Maris stepped outside into the warm afternoon. The Chicago skyline stretched before her. It was a skyline in which she now owned a significant piece. She drew in a deep breath and adjusted her sunglasses. She had entered the courthouse as a woman fighting to protect her life. She walked out as an empire. What a legendary victory. Maris proved that when someone attempts to bury a brilliant woman, she may simply purchase both the shovel and the ground beneath their feet. Lenora's arrogance cost her the entire family legacy. If you loved this incredible courtroom drama and the ultimate act of financial justice, press the like button, share this story with someone who appreciates a brilliant twist, and subscribe for more unbelievable legal takedowns.